Let's start with Azure Advisor. Well, let's say when you see the job descriptions, the organizations put in, what do they say? Hey, we are looking for a 4 years experienced candidate with experience in Terraform, with experience in DevOps, with experience in Azure admin, with experience on some of the automation tools, blah, blah, blah. Or we're looking for 5 years experienced candidate who is highly experienced in design, implement, support Azure infrastructure services, including the cost optimization, performance optimization, high availability, and operational excellency. So when you see these descriptions, that means organizations are looking for an experienced candidate so that their workloads and applications are optimized. Well, Microsoft is offering a service called Azure Advisor. It is like a personalized cloud consultant that helps you follow best practices to optimize your Azure deployments. Okay. So it analyzes your resources configuration and uses telemetry and then recommends solutions that can help you improve the cost effectiveness, performance, high availability, and security of your Azure resources. With Azure Advisor, you can do a lot of personalized things. You see the cost optimization. Azure Advisor, the specialty of it is the personalized cloud consultant itself is a consultant. It will not just tell you, hey, always create some C15 instance, but it tells you, it goes into your account and it tells you, hey buddy, there are 100 instances in your account. Of the 100, there are 5 instances that you've over provisioned. Okay, go there to this instance, XYZ instances, and reduce the size of it so that you can save some $500 a month. It goes into your account, audits your account, and tells you the specific recommendations into cost optimization. Maybe it goes into your account and says, hey, for XYZ virtual machines, the hard disk is configured to be ultra hard disk, where you're utilizing 5% of its IO capacity. So you better change the hard disk type to premium SSD so that you save some $1,000 a month. It goes into your account, audits your account, and tells you, hey, there is X virtual machine whose hard disk is provisioned to be 1 TB, but you're only using 200 GB of it. You cut down the size so that you save this amount of money. So I mean to say that it just doesn't gives best practices in general, generalized best practices, but it tells you the specific recommendations into cost optimization, security hardening, reliability or high availability, operational excellency, and performance optimization. Into these 5 areas, it is going to give you personalized recommendations and advices. Let's quickly go to the portal and see how it looks like. Search for Azure Advisor. This is how it looks like. Okay. In the left hand side, you see, when I go to the overview, it audits. In the overview, it gives a dashboard. It audits your account and tells what cost optimization recommendations do they have. Into the security, it tells you what security hardening recommendations do they have. Into the reliability or high availability, they have recommendations, operational excellency, and performance optimization. And remember, some basic features of Advisor are free. However, if you wanted to leverage all the audits and recommendations that are available in Azure Advisor, well, that is paid or a premium feature. And whatever recommendations that it is making, you can download it as a CSV file or you can download it as a PDF file. Once you download the PDF file, what normally people does is the manager is going to set up a meeting with his teammates and going to go through each recommendation. Hey, why do we have this recommendation? For example, if I go here into the security, just click on it. You see, in the left-hand side, it comes to the recommendation security. It is telling Microsoft Defender for Resource Manager should be enabled. But again, Microsoft Defender is not a free of cost service again. Microsoft Defender for DNS should be enabled. Account with owner permissions on resources should be enabled for multi-factor authentication. So it is not just a generic recommendation. It's not telling you, hey, when you're going out, your mother and father says, hey, be careful. Okay, so that's a generic advice. But when you're going on a specific work, knowing the good and bad, pros and cons of that work, if somebody gives you a specific advice or based on your performance, if somebody tells you, hey, these are the mistakes that you're making, do this, it is that kind of a personalized advice. You see, when you click on it, when I click on this particular recommendation, see, it is a very high security issue. Freshness is 12 hours. This particular point is audited before 12 hours, and initial, it is credentials and access related. It falls into brute force of the KB article, security advice, T1110. And see, when somebody asks you about, maybe mentioning your experience, maybe please talk about one of the critical issues that you come across recently. Okay. So when you say, sir, I work as a L2 in my team and most of the activities have been taken care by my team lead or a manager or a consultant, we only look at the ticketing dashboard. We only take care of the very basic tickets like a hard disk expansion or maybe monitoring configuration for virtual machines or log analytics. All of that, that is fine. But assume the other party knows the very basic. Okay. But instead of you submitting yourself that you know very basic, sir, one of the critical issues that I've come across in the recent past is that my account, I mean, our client account is triggered for a security recommendation in the Azure Advisor, that is, accounts with owner permissions on Azure resources should be enabled for multi-factor authentication. So it is one of our audit points. By default, we have enabled multi-factor authentication in our account. However, when that point is triggered, when I go to the recommendation, when I dig in deep, and I've identified particular user account who is part of the admin group is not enabled, and there is also a brute force KB article triggered, which is T1110. Well, the other party, but for that instance, he may not know what is T1110. Okay. But then listening to it, he believes, okay, you're a technical guy, you know things at least. Okay. That is a small difference between, you submitting yourself saying that you're a basic guy, but coming here, you see, principal, kurela.venkat@gmail.com is the root user of this account. And it says this user do not have the multi-factor authentication enabled. You see, instead of telling the very basic generic recommendations, it identified the account ID and it is telling you, boss, this is the ID that do not have MFA enabled. And then they may further dig you in deep into what is MFA, why should you need it, what is the importance of it, what happens if you don't enable MFA, what happens if you enable MFA, all of those questions. So go back again into the security, you see. So email notification to subscription owner for high severity alert should be enabled. So that means it says one subscription that it do not have email notifications not enabled. Storage account should restrict network access using virtual network rules. That means storage accounts now, our current storage accounts have internet access also. So it says this particular storage account have internet access. That means anybody on the internet can access this storage account. But we wanted to ensure, I mean, it is advising you, you restrict the access only within the virtual network. So maybe this is one of the scenarios where you can speak a lot in the interview. Sir, we have multiple storage accounts for different purposes. So one of the Azure Advisor security point triggered saying storage account should restrict network access using the VNets only. When I've gone through, when I've dig in deep and identified the storage account, well, that is fine. That particular storage account is actually configured for Azure Data Lake, which is exposed to the internet. Okay, that's fine. We are expecting it to be on internet, but we have enough firewalls and rules configured for it. It only allows REST API from a specific SaaS keys, blah blah blah. So whatever security things that you have learned part of your Azure storage account, you apply that in here. Also, the regular best practices. Okay, what is SaaS keys? Anybody? So these are the best practices into security. Also into cost optimization. Let's say as of now, if it says it is good, everything is good. Everything is good because I don't have any resources running. See the list of recommendations. If I click on to see the general recommendation, what comes out, use standard storage to store managed disk snapshots. So if you store if you store it into premium, which is SSD based, it may cost you because it is anyways a snapshot, a backup copy. Right size or shut down underutilized virtual machines. Guys, as of now, it sounds maybe best practice. Yes. But then when it is triggering here, it tells you, hey boss, this particular virtual machine is ideal for past 7 days. It would be better if you shut it down. Okay, it will give you that specific recommendation. You have disks which have not been attached to virtual machine for more than 30 days. Please evaluate if you still need the disk. See, so it may sound like a best practice, but when this particular point triggered here, it will give you a list of hard disks that have not been connected to any virtual machine for the past 30 days, and it will advise you to delete them. But now it is your turn after auditing, after going through them. What was the reason for the disks not connecting to the virtual machines? So that you make a decision whether to delete the hard disks or not. And so you've got hundreds of best practices, recommendations, points into the cost optimization, also into reliability or high availability. You see, enable cross-region restore for your recovery service vault. When we go to the backups, you'll get to know what is recovery service vault, RSV, but it says enable cross-region. Currently, what happens is this particular vault, the repository, is enabled, where all the backups dumps into it. However, if that particular entire region goes down, well, the backup copies will also get corrupt. Instead, enable cross-region restore. When I enable it, maybe to a different region, it will start replicating the data. It is a cross-region data replication, so that anything may happen, you still will be in a safe side. So any area, any of these recommendations can be downloaded as CSV or as PDF. You can also create an alert. Hey, whenever a new recommendation comes here, you notify me immediately. Operational, I mean, reliability, it is just one recommendation that is triggered. If you wanted to really see reliability recommendations, you can see the complete list here. Okay, high availability related things. It tells you to configure load balancer. It tells you to configure virtual machine scale set and all. Then the operational excellency. So operational excellency is about administrative activities optimization. See, it says switch to Azure Monitor based alerts for backup. So there is one recovery service vault. When I click on it, enable Azure Monitor alerts and notifications for backup. So into this recovery service vault, whenever a backup fails, backup fires, backup success, it is saying you enable Azure Monitor alert so that we will notify the administrator. One of the points. If you really wanted to understand recommendations into operational excellency, you can see them all here. Update your outdated Azure Spring Cap SDK to the latest new HCX version is available batch. Increase the number of CPUs resources you can deploy by 10 vCPU. So it tells you for optimizing the resources. Also add monitor to your virtual machine label as production. So you see that there are some virtual machines which have been labeled as production, labeled as tags. So when you configure them environment equals to production, you wanted to add all those machines to the monitor. One of the recommendation. So NTP client is for the time synchronization. An Azure environment update has been rolled out that may affect your checkpoint firewall. So it immediately notifies accelerated networking. So you enable this if your network interfaces or your virtual machines needs optimized or enhanced network connectivity. Okay, monitoring add-on workspace is deleted. So I mean, it just says how you perform your daily BAU activity, your regular administrative activities effectively, and so the performance. I mean, it is based on the services. You see, Kubernetes here, compute here. Okay, use managed disks to prevent disk IO throttling. Can anybody speak about this point? We've already talked about it. Can anybody spend a minute to talk about this? See, can anybody talk about this for a minute? We've talked about it at length in the previous classes. Please, this is little important. I wanted to understand your understanding. Can you spend a minute to talk about it? See, what are the two types of hard disks that we have? Managed, and unmanaged. So what is unmanaged? So unmanaged is handled by the customer, by ourselves. Handling is what? So to create a hard disk, we need to create a storage account. When you create a storage account, there is certain IO limitation is there. There is certain number of hard disks limitation is there. You cannot create more than 63 or 65 number of hard disks. So there is some throughput limitation is there. So what it is saying, use managed disks to prevent disk IO throttling. So disk IO contention. So instead of you creating hard disks, unmanaged hard disks, create managed hard disks so that Microsoft will create storage account. They will handle IO limitations. They will handle throughput limitations. They will handle number of hard disks limitation. That's what it says. Convert managed disks from standard HD to premium SSD to get the best performance of it. But again, it will not just tell you convert managed disks from standard to premium. If there is any hard disk that is struggling for the IO capacity, IO more number of IOPS, but it is not getting because it is a standard hard disk, it will identify such hard disks and tell you, boss, 1, 2, 3, these are the 3 hard disks. You better convert them in from standard to premium. Enable accelerated networking to improve network performance and latency. Enable accelerated networking to improve network performance and latency. So accelerated networking is not part of all the virtual machines. Only virtual machines of few categories, you will have accelerated networking, with which you will get not just 1 Gbps, but 10 Gbps of a network connectivity. So if there are any virtual machines that needs 10 Gbps of a network connectivity, it will identify and it will give you the list to enable this. So you may have to shut down the machines, change the instance type, and then configure enhanced networking. Use SSD disks for production workloads. So it will identify. So accordingly, into these 5 areas, it is not just going to give generic best practices and recommendations, but it is going to identify the list of virtual machines or list of storage account, list of networks into appropriate categories and tells you the best practices and recommendations. So that's about Azure Advisor. Do you have any questions?